My best friend slowly poisoned my entire social circle against me over 3 years, systematically destroying every relationship I had. When I finally discovered the truth, I realized she'd been planning my complete isolation from the very beginning. It started so subtly that I almost missed it entirely. Sarah had this way of tilting her head when she listened, making you feel like you were the most important person in the world. When we met during freshman orientation at college, she zeroed in on me immediately, complimenting my vintage band t-shirt and asking about the obscure indie groups I mentioned. Looking back, I realized she'd done her homework, researching my social media posts before we even spoke. The first red flag should have been how quickly she wanted to become roommates. Within a week of knowing each other, she was suggesting we find an apartment together off campus. We just click so perfectly, she said, her green eyes sparkling with what I thought was genuine friendship. It's like we were meant to be best friends. The way she said it made me feel special, chosen. I'd never had someone pursue my friendship so intensely before. Our apartment became the central hub for our friend group. Sarah had this magnetic personality that drew people in, and soon we had a regular crowd of 8 or 9 people who would gather for movie nights, study sessions, and weekend parties. She was the perfect hostess, always remembering everyone's favorite snacks, their birthdays, their relationship drama. I felt proud to be her best friend, basking in the reflected glow of her popularity. But Sarah had rules, though she never called them that. She'd make little comments when I hung out with friends without her. "Oh, you went to lunch with Emma? I thought we always did things together on Tuesdays." Her voice would carry just a hint of hurt, enough to make me feel guilty for not including her. When I'd try to explain, she'd wave it off with a laugh. "I'm just being silly. I guess I'm just used to us being a package deal." The comments escalated so gradually that I didn't notice the pattern. If I mentioned grabbing coffee with Marcus from my literature class, Sarah would wrinkle her nose slightly. "Marcus? Isn't he the one who never pays when you all go out?" She'd pause, as if considering her words carefully. "I just worry he's taking advantage of how generous you are." Her concern felt genuine, protective even. When I started dating Jake, a guy from my chemistry lab, Sarah's reaction was more pronounced. She hugged me when I told her, squealing with apparent excitement. But later that night, she sat me down with a serious expression. "I hope you don't think I'm overstepping, but I saw Jake at that party last weekend, talking really closely with some girl. I didn't want to say anything, but she'd trail off, letting me fill in the blanks with my own insecurities." The seed of doubt she planted grew quickly. I found myself watching Jake more carefully, analyzing every interaction he had with other women. When he was naturally friendly with our server at dinner, I wondered if Sarah had been right to be concerned. The relationship became strained under the weight of my paranoia, and when Jake and I broke up 2 months later, Sarah was there with chocolate ice cream and reassurances that I deserved so much better. "You're too trusting," she said, stroking my hair as I cried. "It's one of the things I love about you, but it also makes you vulnerable. Good thing you have me to look out for you." The comfort she provided felt like a lifeline, and I grew even more dependent on her friendship. The isolation happened so slowly that I didn't realize what was occurring until it was almost complete. One by one, my friendships began to deteriorate. Emma stopped returning my texts after what Sarah described as a really awkward conversation, where Emma had apparently said some hurtful things about me. "I probably shouldn't even tell you this," Sarah said, her face twisted with reluctance. "But she said she thinks you're becoming really self-absorbed." I defended you, of course, but she seemed pretty set in her opinion. When I confronted Emma about it, she looked genuinely confused. "I never said that. Sarah told me you were upset with me for something, but she wouldn't say what. I've been giving you space because I thought you needed it." The disconnect was puzzling, but Sarah's explanation seemed more plausible. She's probably just embarrassed about what she said. People do that when they're caught. Marcus stopped coming to our group gatherings after Sarah mentioned that I'd complained about him never contributing financially. "I thought you should know that it's been bothering people," she told him privately, or so she claimed. When Marcus asked me about it directly, I was mortified. I had mentioned it once, in passing, but Sarah had transformed my casual observation into a serious grievance. The pattern continued with devastating efficiency. Sarah would share carefully edited versions of conversations, planting seeds of discord that grew into full-blown conflicts. She had this talent for taking small truths and twisting them just enough to create maximum damage. A joke became an insult, a concern became a betrayal, a casual comment became a character assassination. By my junior year, our once vibrant friend group had shrunk to just Sarah and me, plus 2 other people who seemed to exist solely in Sarah's orbit now. I felt lonely, despite being constantly surrounded by her presence. When I expressed sadness about losing so many friendships, Sarah would comfort me with explanations that made me the victim of other people's jealousy or immaturity. "They were never real friends anyway," she'd say, her hand warm on my shoulder. "Real friends don't abandon you when things get complicated. I'm the only one who's stuck by you through everything." Her logic seemed sound, even as something deep in my gut whispered that things didn't add up. The breaking point came during the spring semester of my senior year. I was struggling with my thesis and feeling overwhelmed by the pressure of impending graduation. Sarah suggested I talk to Dr. Peterson, my advisor, about getting an extension. When I met with him, however, his response caught me completely off guard. "Sarah already spoke with me about your difficulties," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "She's very concerned about your mental state. She mentioned you've been having some problems with paranoid thinking and social relationships." My blood turned to ice as he continued. "She thought it might be helpful if I knew about your concerns regarding the other students in your program." I had never spoken to Sarah about paranoid thinking, and I certainly hadn't asked her to discuss my mental state with my advisor. When I pressed Dr. Peterson for details, the picture that emerged was horrifying. According to Sarah, I had been experiencing delusions delusions about my friends conspiring against me, becoming increasingly isolated and suspicious of everyone around me. She showed me some concerning messages, Dr. Peterson said gently. Texts where you were accusing your roommates of plotting against you, claims that people were spreading rumors. She's worried you might need professional help. The messages were real, but they were taken completely out of context. What Sarah hadn't shared were her own messages, the ones where she'd told me about various friends talking behind my back, the ones where she'd encouraged my suspicions and validated my growing paranoia. She had carefully curated evidence that made me look unstable while positioning herself as the concerned friend trying to help. That night, I sat in our apartment staring at my phone, scrolling through months of text conversations with Sarah. Patterns I'd never noticed before jumped out at me with startling clarity. Every piece of drama, every falling out, every source of conflict could be traced back to something Sarah had said or done. She had been the common denominator in every relationship that had soured, the messenger who brought bad news about what others were supposedly saying about me. I started making a timeline, writing down everything I could remember. The exercise was nauseating. Sarah had orchestrated my isolation with the precision of a master manipulator, feeding me just enough truth to make her lies believable, always positioning herself as my protector while she systematically destroyed my support system. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I reached out directly to Emma, Marcus, and several other former friends, asking if we could meet for coffee. The conversations that followed were revelatory and heartbreaking. Each person had a similar story. Sarah had told them I was upset with them for various reasons, that I had been saying negative things about them, that I needed space. She had played both sides, telling me they were criticizing me while telling them I was criticizing them, then stepping back to watch the friendships crumble. I tried to reach out so many times, Emma said, tears in her eyes as we sat in the campus coffee shop where we used to study together. But Sarah kept saying you didn't want to hear from me, that trying to contact you would just make things worse. She said she was protecting both of us from more hurt. Marcus nodded grimly when I shared what I'd discovered. She had this way of making it seem like she was just looking out for everyone's feelings, like she was the peacekeeper trying to manage all the drama. I never realized she was creating the drama in the first place. The scope of Sarah's manipulation was breathtaking. She had kept detailed mental notes on everyone's insecurities, their relationship problems, their family issues, and had weaponized that information to create conflict. She knew exactly which buttons to push to make each person doubt themselves and their relationships with others. When I confronted Sarah that evening, her transformation was immediate and chilling. The warm, concerned friend disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating. Her green eyes, which had always seemed so warm and inviting, now looked reptilian in the harsh light of our kitchen. You really think they care about you? She asked, her voice flat and emotionless. You think any of them would have stuck around if I hadn't been managing your relationships for you? You're clingy, paranoid, and exhausting to be around. I've been doing everyone a favor. The mask had finally slipped completely. Sarah explained her actions with the detached interest of someone discussing a science experiment. She had recognized my loneliness and desperation for friendship from the very beginning, she said. It had been easy to position herself as my savior, while gradually eliminating any relationships that might threaten her control over me. You needed me, she said simply, and I made sure you'd always need me. It's not my fault you're too weak to maintain friendships on your own. The cruelty in her voice was devastating, but also liberating. For the first time in 3 years, I could see the situation clearly. Sarah hadn't been protecting me from difficult relationships. She had been isolating me to ensure her own importance in my life. Every friend she'd driven away was a potential threat to her control. Every relationship she'd sabotaged was one less person who might notice what she was doing. I moved out of our apartment that weekend, staying with Emma while I found a new place. The process of rebuilding my relationships was slow and painful. Some friendships were too damaged to repair, the trust broken beyond recovery. Others required months of careful conversation and mutual forgiveness as we all processed how thoroughly we'd been manipulated. Dr. Peterson apologized when I explained the situation, but the damage to my academic reputation was harder to address. Sarah's poisonous narrative about my mental state had spread to other faculty members, and I found myself having to prove my stability and competence in ways that felt humiliating and unfair. The hardest part was accepting my own role in what had happened. I had been so desperate for friendship, so grateful for Sarah's attention, that I had ignored the warning signs and participated in my own isolation. I had trusted her version of events over my own instincts, allowed her to define reality for me, and in doing so, had given her the power to destroy my other relationships. Therapy helped me understand the dynamics of what had occurred. Sarah was what my therapist called a covert narcissist, someone who maintained a helpful, caring facade while actually being manipulative and controlling. She had identified my vulnerabilities and exploited them systematically, feeding off the drama and chaos she created while positioning herself as my only true friend. She needed you to be isolated and dependent, my therapist explained. Your other relationships represented competition for her attention and control. By eliminating them, she ensured that she remained the center of your world. The therapy sessions were painful, but necessary. I had to confront my own patterns of codependency, my tendency to sacrifice my own judgment for the comfort of belonging somewhere. Learning to trust my own perceptions again took months of careful work. Sarah tried to reconnect several times over the following year, reaching out through mutual acquaintances and social media. Her messages followed a predictable pattern: initial anger and blame, followed by hurt confusion about why I was abandoning her, and finally attempts at reconciliation humiliation that painted our entire dynamic as a misunderstanding between two people who cared too much. I blocked her on all platforms and asked our remaining mutual friends not to share information about my life with her. The boundary felt necessary, but also sad. Despite everything she had done, there had been moments of genuine connection between us, or at least moments that had felt genuine to me. Learning to separate the authentic friendship I thought we'd shared from the manipulation that had actually been occurring was one of the most difficult parts of the healing process. By graduation, I had rebuilt some of my friendships and formed new ones based on healthier dynamics. The experience had taught me to pay attention to my instincts, to value relationships that felt balanced and supportive rather than dramatic and intense. I learned to be suspicious of people who seemed too eager to become my confidant, who pushed for intimacy too quickly, or who had negative things to say about everyone else in my life. Emma and I became close again, our friendship stronger for having survived Sarah's attempts to destroy it. Marcus and I maintained a more casual relationship, but one built on mutual respect and understanding. We had all learned valuable lessons about the importance of direct communication and the danger of allowing one person to control the narrative about our relationships with others. Years later, I heard through the campus grapevine that Sarah had targeted another lonely freshman, becoming her instant best friend and slowly isolating her from other relationships. The pattern was so familiar, it made me feel physically sick. I considered reaching out to warn the girl, but ultimately decided that my interference might do more harm than good. Instead, I focused on my own continued healing and the relationships I was building based on honesty and mutual support. The experience with Sarah changed me fundamentally. I became more cautious in my friendships, more aware of the subtle ways people can manipulate and control others. But I also became more appreciative of genuine connection, more grateful for friends who supported my other relationships rather than trying to undermine them. Looking back, I can see that Sarah's greatest success wasn't just isolating me from others, it was making me doubt my own perception of reality. She had trained me to rely on her interpretation of events, to trust her judgment over my own instincts. Breaking free from that dynamic required not just leaving her behind, but learning to trust myself again. The scars from those 3 years took a long time to heal. Even now, years later, I sometimes catch myself second-guessing my perceptions of social situations, wondering if I'm missing some hidden dynamic or manipulation. But I've learned that healthy relationships don't require constant vigilance and analysis. Real friends don't pit you against others or make you feel like you need them to interpret the world for you. Sarah taught me that monsters don't always look the part. Sometimes they come disguised as your biggest supporter, your most loyal friend, your protector from a cruel world. They're the ones who seem to care the most, who always have time to listen to your problems, who make you feel special and chosen. But underneath that caring facade lies something much darker: the need to control, to manipulate, to be the center of someone else's universe at any cost. The most insidious part of her manipulation was how she made me complicit in my own isolation. She never directly told me to cut people off. Instead, she fed me just enough poisonous information to make me doubt everyone around me. She let me make the choice to distance myself from others, all while positioning herself as the voice of reason, trying to help me navigate difficult relationships. Recovery meant learning to distinguish between helpful concern and manipulative interference, between supportive friendship and controlling behavior. It meant rebuilding my ability to trust my own instincts and maintain relationships without needing someone else to validate or interpret them for me. Today, I'm surrounded by friends who encourage my other relationships, who celebrate my successes without making them about themselves, who can disagree with me without making it personal. The contrast with my friendship with Sarah is stark and serves as a constant reminder of how far I've come. The girl Sarah targeted after me eventually figured out what was happening and escaped the same trap I'd fallen into. We connected briefly online, sharing our experiences and validating each other's perceptions of what we'd endured. Knowing that I wasn't the only one, that Sarah's behavior followed a predictable pattern, helped me let go of the last vestiges of self-doubt about what had really happened. Sarah continues to move through the world, charming new victims and leaving a trail of broken relationships behind her. But her power over me is gone. Broken the moment I chose to trust my own eyes over her carefully constructed narrative. That choice, to believe my own experience rather than her interpretation of it, was the first step toward freedom, and every day since has been another step further away from the person I was when she controlled my world. The monster was never the friends she claimed were talking behind my back, or the boyfriends she suggested were cheating, or the professors she painted as biased against me. The monster was the person sitting beside me, holding my hand while she whispered poison in my ear, making me grateful for her protection while she systematically destroyed everything good in my life. And the most terrifying part is how completely I trusted her, how willing I was to see everyone else as the threat while she slowly, methodically took everything away.